Happy New Year, everybody, and welcome to 2025, the first episode of The Buzz. I'm your host, George Bissell. Joining me is Dave Shovein. We just wrapped up the second base portion of our ongoing fantasy baseball positional preview series over at The Buzz. We've covered catchers and first baseman already. We'll move on to third base next week. You can find the link in the description to access all of our content moving forward. Make sure you subscribe to receive every installment of our content direct to your inbox. Everything is free right now heading into spring training as we start on this exciting journey with all of you. This week alone, we put out our top 50 second base rankings for 2025. Dave's stellar early NFBC ADP analysis that dropped earlier this week. We also had an Ask the Experts piece featuring Sarah Sanchez, really one of my favorite analysts in the fantasy space. We also dropped a fresh rankings debate before wrapping up the week with my top 50 dynasty rankings at the Keystone. Really, all that we ask is that you head over, subscribe for free, and share it with all your fantasy baseball obsessed friends, unless, of course, they play in your league. Now, Dave, I'm probably going to dispense with the pleasantries on every single episode from here forward. But I just want to say that it's a pleasure to be doing this with you, and I'm excited for what we've got planned going into 2025.
Yeah, same here. I'm excited to get going on this.
So let's dive right into the biggest takeaways from spending the last week really digging in at second base. And I kind of want to start with the state of the position and the fact that we both have Matt McLain as the second best option at the Keystone going into next year. I'm really struggling to find any reasons why he wouldn't deliver on a 20 home or 20 steal projection right now.
Yeah, for me, the only real concern is, health. And I think as long as he stays healthy and hitting where he is in that Reds lineup, I think 2020 season, strong counting stats, good average. I mean, he's one of only two players at the position that I have going 2020 this year. And the other is, Zach Geloff, and he's going to crush your batting average while doing it. So,
Yeah, I know everyone has the concerns based on the fact that he missed all of last season recovering from shoulder surgery and then he had a stress fracture in his rib cage. But he looked healthy in the Arizona Fall League. He was hitting the ball with authority. Looked like everything was fine from a physical standpoint, and he was outstanding in his rookie year the year before. And the thing that stands out to me is Terry Francona, his team's run. There's a pretty consistent track record of him letting his guys loose on the base paths. And McLean's one of the few X factors that Cincinnati has. So I think he's going to have a huge year this year. I don't see a way he's not one of the top options at the Keystone, which isn't really where he's being valued right now. And that kind of blends into what you're talking about in your NFBC early ADP analysis as well, that he's one of the guys who seems undervalued right now, right? Who else stands out to you when you looked at the data early on in the process?
yeah, definitely McLean. He's like the major inflection point for me. As you said, he's second in both of our rankings. He's sixth off the board by ADP right now. That's probably going to come up a little bit when we see him healthy during spring training as, the hype starts to build. But I still think he's going to end up being a value. He's my top target at the position. The earliest he's gone in any draft in the past month or so is about pick 86. It's kind of where I'm targeting him right now. If I miss on him, I like Altuve more than the market. He's maybe a fallback option for me. Otherwise, Andres Jimenez. I think with the move to the Blue Jays, I think he's going to be a stud there. I think he gets you 30 steals, helps out with everything across the board. I like Brandon Lowe a little bit later. And then there's a few options mixed in throughout the position, but those are kind of my three main guys right now.
Yeah, we'll get to some of our sleeper candidates a little bit later on in the show today. But I think what stood out to me when we did our rankings is that you had Altuve at the top of the position, Ketel Marte right there as well. So, what kind of stands out to you about the top handful of guys at the position? I think it's been pretty steady over the last few years, but I think we're going to be a little bit different than the rest of the crowd in terms of having McLean there at the top, and then. It looks like we're a little bit more aggressive on Marcus Semien as well. He's a guy we had towards the top as well. So, is there anything else that stood out to you about the top of the position right now for fantasy managers to know?
No, that's pretty much it for me. I mean, Altuve and Semien in particular, they're just so consistent and they help out with everything across the board. And, there's really something to be said about, guys that are going to show up. Semien's going to get 650 at bats and Altuve's going to get around 600 and they're going to hit for a good average. They're going to help out in every category. And really, especially early in those early rounds, you want that kind of consistency and you want someone who's not going to crater your team. So yeah, those are my type of guys.
Yeah, Semien, the durability. He's played at least 155 games in eight of the last nine full seasons going back to 2015. And Altuve hasn't shown any signs of slowing down. He's the only guy to record a 2020 season last year at the position. Really was more durable than he had been the last 2 years before that. So Yeah, I think the top of the position hasn't changed much. I'm a little bit higher on Marte than I think you are from a projection standpoint, and we should note that's an interesting thing process-wise, is you really dig in from a projection standpoint and use a standings game point formula to determine your rankings. So it's based solely on the numbers. I like to use the numbers and then go a little more gut feel on some stuff, adjusting my projections. So I definitely lean on the numbers, but you are solely analytics based here on your numbers, right? That's your process.
Yeah, at least trying to be. I try to go in without any biases, project everybody and see what comes out. I mean, every year there's guys at each position that I don't expect to be in on that, there's probably a bias in there as well that I'm probably projecting them lower than I should be and they still pop out on the rankings. So that kind of gives me, a second reason to look at everybody and I kind of trust the projections on what comes out.
So when we started this project, one of the things we wanted to do was a rankings debate at each position and highlight a couple guys where we kind of diverged on our projections and where we thought they'd be valued. And one guy that stood out to me at second base was Jordan Westburg. I found myself being a lot higher on him than you, and I think the market is as well when you look at some of the early ADP numbers. Your argument isn't based on the talent. It's more of a projection standpoint and the value he's going to deliver relative to what you're paying. Is that sort of the crux of the argument? Am I getting that right?
Yeah, 100%. I don't doubt the talent at all. And the market's all over him. I think he's like the fifth guy off the board at the position by ADP right now. For me, it comes down to one, I don't trust the power completely coming back, off the injury last year, the injury to his hand. I still think he's going to hit 20 homers. I just don't think the ceiling is there as, some people are expecting. I think hitting in the bottom third of the Orioles lineup is just going to ding his counting stats so much, just compared to the other options around him at the position, not overall. And then I don't think he's going to be an asset in stolen bases just based on the position in general. Like I have him projected for 7 steals, but I have 16 guys ranked ahead of him, and only one of them I have with fewer than 7 stolen bases. So I think while he might, give you something there, he's going to put you kind of, behind the ledger at the position. Just when you're looking at all the other options.
Yeah, I think, like you said, Andres Jimenez, Bryson Stott, Nico Horner, those are all guys who are going to steal a ton of bases. So they're kind of going in a similar spot ADP wise. They're actually going later in most drafts right now. So I think that's a valid argument. I think where I push back a little bit on it, and I like when we disagree. I like conflict on this show. People are going to find that. I'm an optimistic pessimist. I think where I push back a little bit is, the overall value of stolen bases league wide. I think it's diminished from a fantasy standpoint because there's so many guys stealing more bases as a result of the rules changes that went in a couple years ago. So I think that's the only area where I'd push back and say I don't care so much about the steals because I feel like I can make that up elsewhere. So if I feel like the baseline floor for Westberg's a little higher, even if the counting stats might not be there, that's kind of where I lean with him. So that's kind of my only area I push back on with him. Let's talk about some X factors. Guys who we think are gonna, you know, maybe go up or down in these rankings depending on what happens. And I'll start with Gleyber Torres. I think old friend, old face in new place. He's going to the Detroit Tigers, one of the big offseason moves at the position. He's a guy who stands out to me where if he gets back to some of the previous levels he's shown in his career, he could join that upper echelon tier at the position. What's your kind of overall take on Torres right now?
Yeah, he's the guy that I like as well. And I don't want to sound like too much of a homer on this one, being a Tigers fan, but I like the fact that he took the 1 year pillow deal to try to, prove his value going into next year. So he's going to be out to just put up the best numbers that he can across the board, trying to land that big multi-year contract next winter. AJ Hinch likes to be aggressive on the bases. I think he's going to run more than he did with the Yankees. I think he's going to slot in second in that lineup, hitting behind Parker Meadows there. I think he's going to have a ton of counting stats. Comerica obviously doesn't play well for power, but I still think he's, a 15, 20 homer guy, helping out across the board. And where he's currently going, he's definitely someone that I'm actively targeting, whether it be as a second baseman if I miss on some of the top guys or, as a middle infielder.
Yeah, he's still in his prime, only 28 years old, and it feels like one of those classic change of scenery guys where I don't think anyone's expecting anything close to that 38
Right.
home runs he hit back in 2019. But, if you're talking about a guy who gets back to the 20 homer threshold, maybe the steals bump up a little bit. That's a borderline top 10 guy where you probably don't have to pay that type of price on
For
draft day.
sure. And his first half was just so brutal last year that it's bringing down his overall numbers so much. If he can just put two halves together like he did in the second half, yeah, the power was down, but everything else across the board, checks out.
Yeah. Another guy who stands out to me, Luis Garcia Jr. really put it together last year. I'm not sure. Are we are we talking enough about this guy? I feel like every time I look at him, I'm even more impressed. When you look at, he always had the bat to ball skills, but really took a huge step forward in terms of hard hit rate and barrel percentage. Just a lot more hard contact this year. Are we not talking about him enough to steal a talk radio term? Like, should we be talking about him more?
I think we probably should be. I think in general, people aren't giving the Nationals offense enough credit. I think the top six in that lineup is going to be very strong this year. Um, he's the guy, he grades out about neutral for me. So he's the guy I'm going to look at cost if I miss on some of my other targets. He doesn't look like a huge value. But that's nothing against him. That just means, the market, sees what we see and thinks that, there's, going to be another step there. I mean, he feels like he's somebody who's been around forever, but he's still so young and so talented. And I think, especially what he did last year, is just going completely under the radar.
Yeah, I think from a process standpoint, like we do a week's worth of content here. So we start out with the redraft rankings for 2025, and then we write a bunch of other columns, and then I go in with my dynasty rankings. And there's always one or two guys who stand out either positively or negatively. So you're on both ends of the spectrum. And he was the guy I kept coming back to, going, man, I think I really was impressed with what he did last year, and I think he can kind of build off of that. So yeah, that was the guy for me who stood out. Was there anybody like that for you when we did this whole process that stood out either in a positive way or a negative way at the position?
Uh, in a positive way, I already mentioned Brandon Lau. I didn't expect to be as in on him as I was. He kind of really popped for me. In terms of a negative, can't
Yeah,
really think of anyone offhand. I mean, Luis Ariz is always a guy that I'm kind of down on just because of the profile. I don't like no power, no speed, all average type of guys. Um,
I
yeah,
was down a
Brandon Lau
little,
for sure.
a little bit on Xander Bogaerts. Like I wasn't as enthusiastic about his future because I'm not sure there's enough of a separation, especially from a dynasty standpoint. Like I don't think the separation between him and like a Luis Rengifo is as big as we think it is. Obviously, Rengifo missed the time last year, but he's been great. If you go look at his last 2 years. He's been fantastic. He's had 22 homers and 30 steals in just over 200 games the last two seasons. So I think he's a real X factor where we also don't know the health status of Zach Neto, their starting shortstop. So if he's going to miss time at the start of the year, coming off shoulder surgery, like Rengifo is going to play a bunch of spots and could be really interesting. So I was surprised he wasn't higher in your projections. I think he
Yeah,
didn't.
that was one that surprised me a little bit because Rengifo was a guy that I was on everywhere last year. I had him on every single team I drafted, and I loved. He had four positions of eligibility last year. He's down to two coming into this year with only second base, third base, but I do expect him to gain shortstop as well. Zach Neto, I'm completely off on. I think he's going to miss substantial time. The Angels, not saying anything about what's going on there, definitely has me concerned. But with Rengifo, I'm not sure what I'm going to get. Like I liked the power profile heading into last year, and then the power dropped off, and then out of nowhere, he's just this awesome base stealer. I think if he continues to run as much as he did last year, and Ron Washington actually puts him atop the lineup and just lets him go, kind of jerked him around a little bit at the beginning of last year. He was only playing like three times a week. If he's settled in there and if he's still going to run, absolutely, I'm going to be all in there. But I kind of want to see how that lineup shakes out, in spring training and kind of what the word out of Los Angeles is on what they're going to do there.
Yeah, the steals were never there before. Like those stolen bases really came out of nowhere, so
Right.
to speak, last year. So let's see if that keeps up. Let's try under a minute here. Let's go in or out on the following guys. I put together a little list. In or out, Marcus Semien.
Uh, in at cost, he's not someone I'm going up to get, but definitely someone I'm interested in.
Xander Bogaerts, in or out?
Kind of the same thing. He's somebody, if I miss on some of my top targets, maybe I'd look at, but not someone that I'm, out there trying to get.
Out, completely out. I have to make some cold, hard calls at this position. I think I'm kind of out on Bogarts. I've loved him throughout his career, but no, I'm out for 2025. Michael Garcia.
Definitely out on Garcia. He's going to be hitting at the bottom of the lineup with Jonathan India there now. He's kind of just a one-trick pony in speed. Out for me.
I think people are going to see that in spring training when he's batting ninth every day. It's going to start to dawn on people that maybe those 40 steals aren't happening. Zach Geloff, I've been in historically, but I've seen the light. I was wrong.
Yeah, kind of where I am also. Maybe if I miss on some of my top targets and I need power speed out of the position and can handle the average hit, but for the most part, probably out.
I just kind of like some of the younger guys coming up. Well, let's talk about some of our sleeper candidates because that kind of fits into what I'm talking about. Who's your top sleeper at the position for 2025?
If we're just going by the data, it probably would have been Thairo Estrada, uh, just because the ADP hasn't caught up yet. I mean, he's gone as high as pick 170 I've seen over the last couple of weeks. So that's definitely, it's not going to be that high, but it's going to even out. He's probably going to be in the mid 200s. Still somebody I like, but not an active target. I liked Hyeseong Kim a lot before he signed with the Dodgers. I don't know where I'm going to end up now that he's, set for this utility role with the Dodgers. If they somehow moved Gavin Lux or Max Muncy, I'd probably, actively be targeting him. But his price is also going to come up now that everyone sees that he signed with the Dodgers and is going to be a part of that lineup. So, how high that gets will kind of determine what I'm doing there.
Yeah, I don't want to go too far down on the rabbit hole in terms of speculation with Kim, but I can't imagine he signed with a team passing up opportunities to play every
Right.
day somewhere else if they weren't going to guarantee him a pretty significant role. I just can't see him languishing on the bench for an entire year. Like, there's a reason he's coming stateside. He wants to play. So I think he's going to play more than people think. And it's not like Gavin Lux has been this brilliant superstar, former top prospect delivering on the hype. It kind of hasn't happened. So look, he's a name to watch. The power is the big thing. He's not going to hit for really any
No.
power, but he has run and he could be a real, batting average booster in deeper fantasy formats.
And the Dodgers like to run. So,
That's true.
and even if he hits at the bottom of the lineup, getting on base in front of, Betts and Freeman and Otani, it's going to lead to plenty of runs scored. He should hit for a good average. So,
It's not the worst spot to be in from a fantasy standpoint. The situation matters. And
yeah,
people, this is what fantasy managers have to realize. This is something we've come to know over the years. Just writing news blurb after news blurb. Sometimes it doesn't matter how good you are. It's are you in the right spot in the right situation sometimes.
exactly.
My guy, Caleb Durbin, I really like him from a speed standpoint. Again, I talked about like you can find your steals elsewhere. He's a guy I'd be throwing a dart on pretty much everywhere. He was the centerpiece of the Devin Williams trade with the Yankees and was really good last year, 31 steals across three minor league levels in the Yankees system. So he's a guy to watch where he's another one who's ticketed for like that super utility role, kind of where I think Bryce Terang goes over to shortstop to replace Adames, and I think he's going to play a lot. And the range of outcomes pretty wide here with him, but I think the skills are going to be there, and that makes him interesting. I also don't think he's going to be a total liability from a batting average standpoint as well. So he's a guy who really stands out to me from that point. Do you have any thoughts on Caleb Durbin? I really
Yeah,
like.
he's somebody that I definitely like the skills on. I'm concerned about the opportunity. They have so many similar type guys in the infield there that you just don't know how it's going to shake out. You got Terang, you got Joey Ortiz, you got Oliver Dunn, you got Tyler Black who could play third base. If it looks like he's going to be in the lineup and be a regular to start the year, absolutely. He's somebody I'm going to be looking for, especially for that speed upside. But that's one spot that I just don't know how it's going to shake out right now.
So he was one where we had a big gap in our rankings. I had him 25th, and you didn't even rank him in your top 40.
Yeah,
So
and it's entirely based on the projection for plate appearances. It's if it looks like he's going to have a job, and I just update, the plate appearances, the skills are there, and he's going to pop up for sure.
So let me throw it over to you here for our dynasty rankings discussion. Who do you want to ask me about? Because I just spent 7 hours writing 5,000 words on dynasty rankings for the Buzz. So you can check those out. Head over to the Buzz. The link is in the description. You can find all of our content there. I'm going to keep promoting it till the end of time. Who are some of the names from a dynasty standpoint that you want to ask me about or talk about?
The guy I'm most interested in is definitely Kristian Campbell with the Red Sox. I love the profile. I just don't trust that the Red Sox are going to do the right thing and give him a shot to play. And it's kind of a catch-22 in terms of draft position because if he does win the second base job in spring training, I mean he's going to just soar up the draft boards. He's going to be a top 10 pick in a lot of high stakes leagues. But he's definitely the guy that I'm most interested in among the prospects.
He's the name to watch when they kick off Grapefruit League action. I know Roman Anthony's going to get all the hype, but I think Campbell might be the more intriguing guy just because second base isn't as deep and he can make more of an impact there. The steals are there. The big thing for him was he was kind of an anonymous prospect when he was drafted, and he made the leap last year by adding a lot of muscle. He put on some weight, and then the exit velocity started to ratchet up. And he was a guy who always had elite bat to ball contact skills. So he really took off last year in the minor leagues. And I have him second from a dynasty standpoint. Like that's ahead of Jackson Holiday because
Yeah.
I think the multi position is going to be there at least at the outset because the Red Sox don't exactly like Trevor Story. Do you really think he's going to stay healthy? Like Campbell can play shortstop. They have some options at second base. They're still sorting out this David Hamilton, Vaughn Grissom, whatever you want to call it, at second base. They shipped Nick York out last year. So, yeah, a lot of questions for the Red Sox there. But Campbell's a guy I think makes that like five category instant impact for fantasy purposes. So, even if he doesn't make the team out of spring training, I think he's a name you should probably be stashing in deeper leagues because the impact's going to be there once he arrives. So, all right, anybody else from a dynasty standpoint that we need to talk about?
What about Travis Bazzana?
I don't think he gets to the majors this year. I hope he does. I had
It would
him.
be fun if he did.
Oh, for sure. I'm not sure yet. I had him seventh, and that's pretty aggressive. I think you could make the argument for guys like Garcia and Westburg over him. First overall pick in last year's draft. I think he's a 2020 threat. The batting average is kind of variable right now, but the bat to ball skills have kind of always been there. And he's such a good athlete. I don't know that it's going to matter where you drop him in. I think he's going to hit and be productive right away. So the big question there, they have Juan Brito, who I wrote about for our sleepers column, where I
The
think,
other guy I was going to ask about.
yeah, he's interesting because the numbers aren't like super great at the AAA level. So he's a guy where they're going to kind of know by midseason what they have, and if he's not hitting and producing, they're either going to go out and trade for somebody or Bazzana's. If he's tearing the cover off the ball, he'll get a shot. So.
But that's assuming that they give Brito the job out of spring. I don't trust the Guardians to do anything. I could still see them going out and bringing back like Ahmed Rosario, play second base, and just completely, put him back in AAA and not even give him that shot. Brito's the guy I like if he's going to play. I think he's got a decent power speed combo. I think he could be a nice late round option. I just don't trust the Guardians.
All right, so I want to end on a positive note. If you had to take if you had to take one player at the position right now as kind of your favorite guy, I know we hit on sleepers, but who's when you go into a draft, who's the guy you're circling on the cheat sheet right now?
It's McLain for sure early on, but because he's going up so high in the draft, it's not going to be as easy to get him. It really looks like Brandon Lowe is a guy that I'm going to end up with a lot of as either a target at the position or at middle infield.
Yeah, I've kind of settled on McLean's kind of my first target. I want to be aggressive on him. He's the type of guy where if you're in an auction, he's one of the first names I want to throw out because I'm going to have my number and I'm going to
Right.
know right away whether he's kind of one of my building blocks going forward. And if I don't get him, then I can pivot to some of my alternatives like a Luis Garcia or a Jordan Westburg, something like that. I think then I know what I'm going to do. So that would be kind of my strategic approach at the position. Dave, any final thoughts at second base? This was a lot of fun. Let's do this again soon, right?
Yeah, no, sounds good to me. Like I said, we're putting out a lot of good content. We've already done catchers, first base. Like George mentioned, I'm doing every Tuesday an ADP analysis where I'm basically, going through and giving you my playbook on how I plan to attack the position based on, what current prices are. Be sure to check that out, and we got a lot more good stuff coming out.
Yeah, we're gonna have an Ask the Experts this week. We're gonna have Ryan Bloomfield from Baseball HQ is coming on to talk third base. So got a lot of good stuff coming up this week. I'm gonna have to get started on my dynasty rankings already because it's gonna take me 9 hours to write the third base one. Wait till we get to outfield and starting
Right.
pitch. You're gonna have to check me into like rehab or something at that point. Dave, this was a lot of fun. That does it for the first edition of The Buzz. First one ever. If you're watching this, you witness history. The Buzz starting right here, right now. We'll be back next week with our third base preview for Dave Shovein. I'm George Bissell saying thanks for listening, and until our next show, so long, everybody.